I woke up that morning with the usual warmth of the sunlight spilling gently across our bedroom, the soft hum of the neighborhood stirring to life outside our window. It was supposed to be just another ordinary day, filled with the quiet comfort of routines I had grown to cherish. But the moment I reached for my wedding ring to slip it onto my finger, the familiar weight was gone. My heart stuttered, a cold wave of disbelief crashing over me. That tiny circle of gold and diamonds was more than just jewelry. It was a symbol of years filled with laughter, tears, promises whispered in the dark, and dreams built together. The thought that someone had taken it, stolen it from the sanctuary of my own home, was a betrayal sharper than any wound I had ever known. I combed through every drawer, every crevice, hoping it had simply slipped from my grasp or fallen somewhere I could reach. But the ring was gone, vanished like a piece of my history torn away without warning. The house felt suddenly colder, the walls echoing with an absence I hadn't expected. I remembered the first time he slid that ring onto my finger, how my hands had trembled with joy and a hopeful kind of fear, not knowing then that this small band would come to represent everything I held dear, and what could so easily be taken away. The sting of loss was profound, but deeper still was the hurt of betrayal, because I knew that this was not a random theft, but something more personal. The people I trusted most had keys to our home, the ones who loved me, or so I thought. The ring was gone, and with it, a sense of safety, a feeling that the world I had built was fragile and exposed. I sat down heavily on the edge of the bed, my fingers brushing the spot where the ring should have been. The silence around me was oppressive, filled with questions that churned endlessly in my mind. Who would do this? Why? What did it mean? It wasn't just about the value of the ring, it was the symbolism, the sacredness of a promise now broken. I knew in that moment that I could not let this go unanswered, that the quiet hurt I felt would soon ignite into something fierce. This was not just about a piece of jewelry, but about reclaiming what was mine, my dignity, my memories, my story. The betrayal cut through the core of me, and I swore silently that whoever had taken it would not get away with it. As I rose from the bed, a strange clarity settled over me. The path ahead was uncertain, but my resolve was clear. I would find the ring. I would confront the pain. I would make sure this loss did not define me, or the life I was determined to rebuild. The day that began with the shock of a missing ring would become the day I chose to fight back, to take control of a story that felt like it was slipping away. This was the first step in a journey I hadn't planned, but was ready to face, fueled by heartbreak and an unyielding hope that what was lost could be reclaimed, even if it meant everything else had to change. The more I searched, the clearer it became that this was no accident or careless mistake. The ring wasn't simply lost or misplaced. It had been taken, pawned, and sold, traded like a common object, stripped of the meaning I had held sacred. What hurt most wasn't just the loss of the ring itself, but the fact that it was done by someone I had trusted, someone who was supposed to protect the memories and love it symbolized. I remembered the faces, the moments I had shared with them, and now they were tangled in a web of lies and betrayal. Each discovery pulled me deeper into a dark undercurrent beneath the surface of what I thought was a solid life. I had always believed in the foundation of trust and family, but now those beliefs were crumbling like old plaster falling from a cracked wall. The idea that the person who had taken my wedding ring was willing to betray me so profoundly brought a mixture of heartbreak and rage. I felt as if the ground beneath me had shifted, leaving me unsteady, but instead of breaking me, it sparked a fire that burned hotter with each revelation. Every phone call I made to pawn shops, every meeting with strangers in shadowed corners, only strengthened my resolve to reclaim what was mine. The ring was no longer just a piece of jewelry. It was a symbol of everything I was fighting for: my dignity, my memories, and my right to control my own story. I found myself retracing footsteps, piecing together fragments of conversations and half-truths that pointed to a betrayal I wasn't ready to accept, but had to confront. It was a painful puzzle, each piece revealing more than I wanted to know about the people closest to me. The sting of deceit mingled with a deep sadness, a sense of having been fooled by those I loved, but it also reminded me of my own strength. In those moments of quiet fury, I realized I wasn't powerless. I could take back what was lost, not only in the physical sense, but in the emotional and spiritual way as well. The fire inside me became a beacon, lighting the path through the darkness of betrayal. I thought about the years I had spent nurturing the relationships that now felt fractured, and how easily trust could be shattered when greed and desperation take hold. It was a bitter lesson, but one I needed to learn in order to move forward. I refused to let this betrayal define me or my future. Instead, I chose to use it as a catalyst for change, a reason to fight for myself and to rebuild a life that was no longer bound by broken promises or stolen treasures. The hidden truth about the ring was painful to uncover, but it was also a call to awaken, to reclaim my power, to stand firm in the face of deception, and to write a new chapter where I was no longer a victim, but the author of my own story. This journey was not just about retrieving a lost symbol. It was about finding the strength to rise from the ashes of betrayal and forge a future filled with resilience and hope. The silence that settled between us was thick and suffocating, a weight pressing down on every word left unspoken and every look that skimmed past the truth without acknowledging it. Inside, I was a tempest, fury simmering beneath the surface, coiling tight like a snake ready to strike. But on the outside, I wore a mask of calm, an unyielding composure that concealed the storm raging within. Each day, the absence of my wedding ring on my finger was a cruel reminder of what had been taken, not just from me physically, but from the life we had built together. The trust, the promises, and the sense of security that once felt unbreakable. I caught myself staring at that bare spot more times than I could count, a silent accusation aimed at the person who had betrayed me and at the helplessness that threatened to swallow me whole. The house we shared, once a sanctuary of laughter and love, now felt like a prison filled with echoes of betrayal, each room whispering secrets I longed to deny but could no longer ignore. I tried to convince myself that silence would protect me, that ignoring the pain would somehow make it fade into nothingness, but the truth was more stubborn and insistent. The anger grew quietly, but relentlessly, a slow-burning fire that colored every interaction and stole the warmth from our conversations. I found myself withdrawing into myself, retreating behind walls of steel and restraint, afraid that if I let my guard down, the floodgates would open and the devastation would spill out uncontrollably. Yet beneath the stoic facade, the need for change became impossible to ignore. The life we were leading, built on unspoken wounds and fractured trust, was no longer sustainable. I was tired of pretending that everything was okay when the empty ring finger told a story of loss and deception louder than any words ever could. Friends and family noticed the shift in me, the quiet distance that grew with each passing day, but I refused to explain. How could I articulate the tangled emotions of love and betrayal, pride and humiliation, hope and despair? It was a battle fought in silence, an internal war where every thought was a weapon and every memory a wound. I began to understand that anger, though painful, was a necessary step toward healing, a sign that I was no longer willing to be a passive victim. It was the spark that would ignite the courage I needed to face the truth head-on, to demand answers, and to reclaim what was rightfully mine. As the days turned to weeks, the silent anger transformed from a heavy burden into a driving force, pushing me toward decisions that once felt impossible. I realized that masking my fury behind calm was no longer enough. Something had to change, not just for me, but for the future I still hoped to build. The empty space where my wedding ring once sat was a constant reminder that the life I had known was shattered, but it was also a symbol of resilience, a call to rise above the silence and confront the betrayal that threatened to define me. The journey ahead was uncertain and daunting, but I was no longer willing to stay silent or still. It was time to take back control, to reclaim my story, and to find strength in the fire of my own anger. The moment I made the decision to fight back, a surge of clarity washed over me that broke through the fog of betrayal and despair I had been trapped in for weeks. It wasn't just about the ring. It never had been. That small circle of gold, worn smooth by years of memory and promises, had come to symbolize everything I had lost and everything I still hoped to reclaim. My dignity, my sense of self, and my control over a life that had suddenly felt like it was slipping through my fingers. I resolved then that no matter the cost, I would buy back my wedding ring. The price wasn't just measured in money, although that was a challenge in itself. It was a cost, paid in courage, in standing up to those who had betrayed me, and in refusing to let this act of theft define me or my future. I pictured the ring, gleaming faintly under a pawn shop's harsh lights, and imagined the moment it would finally rest again on my finger, a quiet victory reclaiming what was mine. It felt like reclaiming a piece of my soul. I knew this battle would not be easy. The path ahead was filled with unknowns. Who held the ring now? How much it would cost to get it back? And what this fight would mean for the relationships already fractured by mistrust and pain. But in that moment, the fear was replaced by resolve. I began to see the situation as not just a personal loss, but a test of my own strength and will. I refused to be a passive victim any longer. This was my stand, my act of defiance against the betrayal that had tried to steal not just my ring, but my sense of worth. Every night after that, I found myself planning the steps I would take, contacting pawn shops, researching how to trace the ring, and quietly gathering the funds I would need. Each phone call was a small battle, every lead a glimmer of hope or a reminder of the harsh reality. The fire inside me burned brighter with each obstacle, fueling a determination I hadn't realized I possessed. The people who had taken the ring thought they could rob me of more than just a piece of jewelry. They thought they could break my spirit and erase the years of love and commitment that the ring symbolized. But I was more than a victim of their greed and deception. I was a woman who had faced pain and betrayal and chosen to rise. The decision to fight back was not born out of anger alone, but out of a deep need to reclaim control over my life and rewrite the story that had suddenly been interrupted by loss. It was about proving to myself that I could still choose my own path, even when the ground beneath me felt uncertain. I wasn't just buying back a ring. I was reclaiming my identity and reminding myself that no one had the right to take that away. The road ahead would be difficult, but the strength I found in that decision became a beacon in the dark, guiding me toward a future where I was no longer defined by what was lost, but by the courage to fight for what mattered most. The quest to trace my wedding ring became an unexpected journey through a maze of shadows and whispered deals. Each step, laced with frustration, yet fueled by an unwavering resolve that refused to let me rest. I found myself navigating pawnshops tucked away in forgotten corners of the city, their windows dusty and signs flickering with the wear of time, places where stories went unspoken and treasures were traded like secrets in the night. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a cold glare on worn counters where I pressed worn photographs of my ring into the hands of wary clerks. Each no I received was a sting, a reminder that the road ahead would be longer and more tangled than I had imagined. I learned to listen for the subtle signs, the flicker of recognition in an eye, a hesitant pause, a glance exchanged behind the counter that hinted I was inching closer to the truth. The people I encountered were a strange mix of wary dealers and forgotten faces, each with their own story, many reluctant to share, some protective of their own secrets. I was an outsider in a world where trust was scarce, and every inquiry felt like walking on thin ice, balancing between hope and disappointment. As days blurred into nights, I pieced together fragmented information, following the faintest trails that led from one dusty pawnshop to another, each new lead a fragile thread weaving through the dark fabric of deceit. It was a relentless pursuit, one that tested my patience and my spirit. But with every step, I felt the fire within me burn brighter, fueled by the knowledge that I was closing in on what had been taken from me. The deeper I dug, the clearer the picture became, not just of where the ring had travelled, but of who had set this chain of events in motion. The journey was painful, peeling back layers of trust and exposing the fractures that had long been hidden beneath the surface of relationships I once believed unbreakable. Each revelation was a shard of glass, cutting through the illusions I had clung to, but also sharpening my determination to reclaim what was mine. I began to understand that this was more than a quest for a piece of jewelry. It was a reckoning with the betrayal that had fractured my life, a confrontation with the person who had crossed a line I never thought possible. The ring had become a symbol of all I was fighting for: justice, dignity, and the right to control my own story. In the quiet moments between calls and visits, I reflected on the strength I was finding in this journey, the resilience that surfaced from the depths of pain. I realized that tracing the ring was also tracing the contours of my own courage, mapping the path from victim to warrior. The road was long, and the destination uncertain, but I would not be deterred. Every pawnshop visited, every whispered conversation overheard, brought me closer to the truth and to the moment when I would face the person responsible. I was reclaiming not just a ring, but my power, one step at a time, fueled by the hope that what was lost could be found again. Buying back my wedding ring turned out to be far more difficult than I had ever imagined, and the cost extended well beyond the dollars exchanged in pawnshops and backroom deals. The financial price was steep enough, the kind that made me hesitate as I counted bills and signed papers, knowing that every cent spent was a sacrifice from a future I had planned differently, but the emotional toll was even heavier. With each payment made, I felt the weight of what the ring represented, the memories woven into its every glint, and the years of love and commitment that it symbolized. It wasn't just about recovering a piece of jewelry. It was about reclaiming a fragment of myself that had been lost in betrayal and deceit. I found myself wrestling with the value of that symbol against the cost of pursuit, asking if the struggle was worth the price, both to my wallet and to my heart. The sleepless nights came in waves, filled with questions about what this fight was really costing me and what it meant for the life I was trying to rebuild. Each dollar spent felt like a battle fought, a statement made that I would not be broken or defined by what had been taken. But alongside the tangible costs, there were invisible wounds, trust shattered, relationships strained, and the quiet loneliness of carrying this fight mostly alone. Friends and family watched from a distance, some offering support, others withholding judgment or retreating into silence, unable or unwilling to understand the depth of my struggle. It was a solitary path marked by moments of doubt and fierce resolve. The ring itself became a symbol not just of love, but of resilience, a beacon that guided me through the hardest days when giving up seemed like the easier choice. I thought often of the life I had shared, the vows exchanged, and the future once imagined, a future that now felt altered and uncertain, but still worth fighting for. The financial burden was a sharp reminder of the sacrifices made, but it paled next to the emotional reckoning I faced daily. I carried the ache of betrayal and loss beneath a veneer of calm, knowing that reclaiming this ring was part of reclaiming my dignity and my story. At times, I wondered if the price was too high, if the cost of revenge might consume more than the loss itself. Yet the fire inside me refused to be extinguished by fear or fatigue. The ring's journey through pawnshops and back alleys was a testament to the chaos wrought by betrayal. But my determination to retrieve it was a testament to the strength born of pain and hope. I realized that this fight was about more than material value. It was about standing up to those who tried to take everything from me and proving that I could rise from the ashes stronger than before. The cost was steep, yes, but so was the reward, the chance to reclaim what was mine, and the chance to rewrite the narrative of my life. With every payment, with every step forward, I moved closer to a future shaped not by loss, but by the courage to confront it head-on. The ring was more than a symbol. It was the key to my healing, and I was determined to pay whatever price necessary to unlock it. Holding the ring in my hand again was a moment I had imagined countless times during those long, restless nights when despair threatened to swallow me whole. The familiar weight of it, cool and solid, carried with it a flood of memories, both joyful and painful, that reminded me why I had fought so hard to reclaim it. But as I stared at the ring, gleaming faintly under the soft light of my living room, a realization settled over me with unexpected clarity. Reclaiming a symbol, as powerful as it was, could not erase the deeper wounds rooted in the very place where my life had begun to unravel. The house, the walls that had witnessed whispered arguments, the silences thick with tension, and the betrayals that cut deeper than any wound, held too many memories that haunted me daily. Each room seemed to echo with the ghosts of what had been lost, the shattered trust, and the love that had once filled the space but was now replaced with a fragile and brittle silence. It was in that moment, clutching the ring, that I understood this was not just about possession, but about closure. The house, with its creaking floors and familiar corners, was a constant reminder of pain I could not simply walk away from, but neither could I continue to live surrounded by it. The walls felt like they carried the weight of my sorrow, heavy and oppressive, and no matter how many times I tried to breathe life into the memories, the shadows lingered. I thought about the years spent trying to build a life within those walls, birthdays celebrated with tentative smiles, quiet evenings filled with hopes for a future that now felt unreachable. The house was meant to be a sanctuary, but it had become a prison holding me captive to the past. The turning point came not with a grand revelation, but with a quiet, aching clarity that whispered, I needed to let go in order to heal. It was a choice between clinging to the remnants of a broken past or stepping into the uncertainty of a new beginning. Selling the house was no longer just an option. It became a necessity, a declaration that I was ready to sever the ties to pain and reclaim my life on my own terms. I remembered the days spent walking through empty rooms, running my hands over surfaces worn by time, feeling the weight of memories pressing in like a storm waiting to break. There was grief in saying goodbye, but also a flicker of hope, like the first light of dawn piercing through a long night. The ring was back where it belonged, but the house was a chapter I needed to close. I realized that true reclaiming was more than recovering what was lost. It was about choosing what to carry forward and what to leave behind. The house, with all its history, was part of my story, but it was not my future. The decision to sell was an act of courage, a promise to myself that I would no longer be defined by betrayal or loss. As I made plans to move on, I felt the first stirring of freedom, a fragile but real sense of hope that life beyond the walls would bring healing, peace, and the chance to rebuild a home filled with new memories and new love. Putting the house on the market felt like shaking the very foundation of my world, a decision that sent ripples of shock and disbelief through the people around me. But deep inside, I knew it was the only way forward. That house had been more than bricks and mortar. It had been the keeper of memories, both tender and painful, the silent witness to years filled with love, betrayal, and everything in between. Every corner held a story, every creaking floorboard echoed with laughter and tears that now felt like ghosts haunting the edges of my days. I had clung to the walls for so long, hoping they might somehow shield me from the ache of loss and the sting of betrayal. But the truth was that staying there kept me anchored to a past I desperately needed to leave behind. The moment I decided to sell was an act of courage, a quiet rebellion against the weight that had threatened to consume me. The process itself was surreal, signing papers that symbolized more than a transaction, inviting strangers to walk through rooms where I had once dreamed of forever, and letting go of a home that had been the backdrop to my story. Friends and family voiced their astonishment, some questioning my choice, unable to understand how I could part with something so intertwined with my life. But they did not see what I saw, the way the walls seemed to close in, the way memories pressed heavy on my heart like an unshakable fog. Selling the house was not just about a physical move. It was a deliberate step toward freedom, a shedding of the past's heavy cloak. I imagined the house becoming someone else's sanctuary, a place where new stories would unfold, and while a part of me mourned the loss, another part felt an unexpected lightness, a breeze that whispered of hope and new beginnings. As the days passed and the house drew interest from potential buyers, I found myself walking through it with a mixture of nostalgia and detachment, seeing it with new eyes, not just as a vessel of pain, but as a chapter I was ready to close. Packing up belongings became an exercise in letting go, each item a token of memories that I carried with me, not as chains, but as lessons learned and scars that marked my journey. I reflected on the person I had become through this ordeal, stronger, wiser, and more determined to shape a future not defined by loss, but by resilience. The decision to sell was a declaration that I was no longer willing to be a prisoner of the past, that I was ready to embrace uncertainty in exchange for the chance to heal. It was a quiet triumph over betrayal, a reclaiming of power through choice. The day the sale was finalized, I stood one last time in the empty living room, the sunlight streaming through windows that no longer felt like cages, but gateways. I breathed in deeply, letting the air fill me with the promise of freedom. Though the house would no longer be mine, the life I was stepping into belonged entirely to me, a blank canvas waiting for the colors of new memories, new joys, and a love rebuilt from the ashes. It was time to turn the page, to stop carrying the weight of loss through empty halls, and to walk boldly into a future of my own making. The moment I announced that I was selling the house and had bought back my wedding ring, the reactions from family and friends came fast and hard. A tidal wave of surprise, disbelief, and in some cases, anger that crashed against the fragile shores of my newfound resolve. Some whispered behind my back, questioning my choices as if I had suddenly become reckless or ungrateful, unable to understand why I would let go of something so tangible and so filled with memories. Others confronted me directly, their voices tinged with hurt and confusion, struggling to reconcile the woman they thought they knew with the one who now seemed determined to rewrite her story on her own terms. Even the person who had betrayed me could not hide the shock, their face a mixture of guilt and defiance when confronted with the truth I was no longer willing to keep silent about. Their opinions and judgments echoed through conversations and social gatherings, but I realized quickly that they no longer held the power they once did. What mattered most was not the approval or condemnation of others, but the quiet strength growing within me, the steady reclamation of my life and my dignity after a long season of loss and silence. I felt a shift inside, like the first stirrings of spring after a harsh winter, as I stood firm in my decision, undeterred by the ripples my choices sent through the people I cared about. I was no longer willing to be defined by the pain inflicted on me or by the expectations imposed by others. This was my life, and I was determined to live it on my own terms, with or without their acceptance. I thought about the years of quiet endurance, the nights spent wrestling with doubt and fear, and the moments when it seemed easier to give up than to fight. But now, with the ring back on my finger and the house in the hands of new owners, I felt a freedom that was as exhilarating as it was terrifying. The reactions around me were a testament to how deeply my actions had disrupted the status quo, challenging not only the broken relationships, but also the narratives we had all clung to for so long. Yet beneath the surface of conflict and confusion, I sensed a subtle respect beginning to take root, an acknowledgement that I was no longer the same person who had quietly borne the burden of betrayal. I was someone who had found her voice, reclaimed her power, and refused to be silenced. The path ahead was uncertain, and I knew there would be more challenges to face, but I welcomed them with open eyes and a steady heart. I had shed the weight of others' expectations and stepped into a space where my truth could breathe and grow. The opinions of those around me were no longer chains, but distant echoes, reminders of a past I was ready to leave behind. I was reclaiming not just a ring or a house, but my very self. And in that reclamation, I found a strength and peace I had long sought, but never fully believed possible. This was the beginning of a new chapter, one written with courage, hope, and the fierce determination to live fully, authentically, and free. As the day I would finally leave the house approached, I found myself standing alone in the quiet spaces where so many memories had been etched into the walls, the floors, and the very air I breathed. The house had been my sanctuary and my prison, a place that held the echoes of laughter and the shadows of heartbreak. Each room a chapter in a story I was both proud of and desperate to escape. I wandered through the empty halls, my footsteps stirring the dust of years gone by, and I felt the weight of every moment that had shaped me, the promises made, the dreams shattered, and the betrayals that had cut deep beneath the surface of what once seemed unbreakable. Ghosts of the past flickered in the corners of my mind, haunting reminders of pain and loss that had left me raw and vulnerable. Yet amid the ache, I also sensed a quiet strength rising within me, a resilience born from the depths of sorrow and tempered by the fires of endurance. I thought about the nights I had spent awake, wrestling with despair, and the days when I felt too broken to stand, only to find somehow that I had moved forward anyway. The house, with all its memories, had witnessed my transformation, from a woman weighed down by grief and betrayal to someone who had found the courage to reclaim her life. I touched the surfaces worn smooth by years of living and loved ones, feeling a bittersweet connection to the past I was about to leave behind. There was grief in saying goodbye, a mourning for what had been lost and for the life I once thought I would always have. But there was also hope, a fragile, luminous hope that shimmered like dawn breaking through the darkest night. I recognized that facing the past was not about forgetting or erasing the pain, but about embracing it as part of the journey that had brought me here. It was about honoring the lessons learned and the strength forged in the crucible of hardship. I thought of the moments that had broken me and those that had built me back up again, like a mosaic pieced together from fragments both shattered and shining. I understood that leaving the house was a symbolic act, a deliberate step away from a chapter marked by betrayal toward a future I could shape with my own hands. The key, turning in the lock for the last time, was more than a physical gesture. It was a declaration of freedom, a letting go of the past's hold over me. As I closed the door behind me, the cool air outside seemed to breathe new life into my lungs, filling me with a sense of possibility and renewal. The road ahead was unknown and daunting, but it was mine to walk, unburdened by the shadows of yesterday. In that moment, I felt a quiet pride in the strength I had found, the courage to face the ghosts of my past, and the resolve to move forward despite them. I carried the memories with me not as chains, but as a testament to resilience and hope. The past had shaped me, but it would no longer define me. I was stepping into a new chapter, one where the weight of loss was replaced by the lightness of possibility, and I was ready to embrace it with open arms and an open heart. Selling the house was like shedding a heavy, tattered coat I had worn for years, one that had shielded me from the cold, but had become too worn and weighed down by the burdens I carried. As the final signatures were inked and the keys passed to the new owners, I felt an unexpected lightness begin to seep into my bones, a subtle but powerful sense that I was finally free to rebuild the pieces of myself that had been shattered by betrayal and loss. Finding a new place was more than just locating a roof over my head. It was about carving out a sanctuary for my soul, a fresh canvas on which I could paint a new chapter of healing, hope, and rediscovery. The fresh walls, untouched by past pain, welcomed me with a quiet promise of possibility. Every corner of this new home seemed to echo with a different energy, a softer, kinder presence that invited me to breathe deeply, to relax, and to start anew. I spent hours walking through the rooms, imagining the laughter that could fill them, the quiet moments of peace I could savor, and the memories waiting to be made. This place was mine to shape, free from the shadows that had haunted the old house and the ghosts that lurked in familiar spaces. I began to unpack not only boxes of belongings, but also the fragments of my heart, carefully sorting through the pain and the hope, the anger and the forgiveness. With each item placed on a shelf or hung on a wall, I felt a growing sense of ownership, not just of a physical space, but of my own story and my power to choose how it would unfold. The fresh start was not without its challenges. There were moments when the weight of the past crept in unexpectedly, when loneliness settled like a fog in the quiet evenings, and the ache of what had been lost whispered through the silence. But these moments were no longer shackles. They were gentle reminders of how far I had come and how much strength I had found within myself. I sought comfort in the small routines that gave my days structure and meaning, tending to plants on the windowsill, sipping tea in the morning light, and opening windows to let the fresh air cleanse both the rooms and my spirit. Slowly, the new place became a refuge, a place where healing took root and began to grow. More than the walls or the furniture, it was the sense of control, of agency over my life, that made the biggest difference. I rediscovered parts of myself I had long forgotten, the dreams deferred, the joys set aside, and the quiet hopes that had never fully faded. The journey to this new beginning was not a straight path. It was marked by setbacks and triumphs, tears and laughter, but it was mine, and that made all the difference. I felt a deep gratitude for the chance to start over, to heal, and to become whole again in ways I had never thought possible. The past had shaped me, but it no longer defined me. With each passing day, I grew stronger, more confident, and more at peace. The new house was more than a shelter. It was a symbol of resilience and renewal, a place where I could finally embrace life on my own terms, free from the shadows of betrayal and full of the promise of tomorrow. As I walked the rocky path toward reclaiming my life, I was surprised to find that I was not as alone as I had feared. Unexpected allies appeared like beacons of light, cutting through the shadows of my struggle, offering support and kindness in ways I had never anticipated. Some were old friends who, despite the distance that had grown between us during the darker days, reached out with open hearts and ready hands, reminding me that the bonds forged in genuine connection could weather even the fiercest storms. Their words of encouragement were like warm blankets wrapped around me on cold nights, offering comfort when doubt threatened to overwhelm. Then there were strangers, whose paths crossed mine in moments I least expected. An empathetic shopkeeper who offered a discount without hesitation when I explained my situation. A quiet neighbor who brought over homemade soup on a day when exhaustion weighed heavily on my shoulders, and even the clerk at the pawn shop who, sensing my determination, gave me extra time and gentle advice. These acts, small yet profound, kindled a sense of hope and reminded me that kindness often comes from the most unlikely sources. Family, too, played a complicated but vital role in this chapter of my life. Some relatives who had been distant or skeptical became unexpected pillars of strength, setting aside past grievances to stand beside me when it mattered most. Their presence was a fragile bridge toward reconciliation and healing, a testament to the resilience of familial bonds even when tested by betrayal. These unexpected allies became more than just helpers. They were lifelines that tethered me to the belief that I could emerge from this ordeal stronger and whole. I realized that support does not always come in grand gestures, but often in the quiet moments of understanding and presence. The shared smile, the listening ear, the silent acknowledgement of pain without judgment. Each act of kindness was a thread woven into the tapestry of my recovery, stitching together the torn fabric of my life. I found myself humbled by the generosity and empathy of those around me, reminded that human connection is a powerful force that can lift us when we falter and illuminate the darkest paths. Their support challenged my isolation and gave me the courage to keep moving forward, even when the road seemed impossibly steep. I also discovered within myself a growing willingness to accept help, to lean into the community around me rather than retreating into solitude. It was a lesson in vulnerability and strength intertwined, teaching me that seeking support is not a sign of weakness, but a courageous step toward healing. The unexpected allies who entered my life during this turbulent time transformed my journey from a solitary fight into a shared endeavor, reminding me that even in our darkest hours, we are never truly alone. Their presence became a source of light and encouragement, fueling my determination to reclaim my life with renewed hope and resilience. As I look back now, I see how these connections, often unplanned and surprising, were essential threads in the fabric of my recovery, weaving together a story not just of loss and betrayal, but also of compassion, community, and the enduring power of kindness. The journey I embarked on, marked by loss, betrayal, and hard-won victories, ultimately taught me the profound and often elusive power of forgiveness, a lesson that did not come as a soft balm to excuse what had been done, but as a fierce, liberating force that untangled me from the heavy chains of anger and resentment, allowing me to walk lighter into the future with a heart that was bruised but no longer burdened. Forgiveness was never about forgetting or pretending the betrayal did not cut deeply. It was about reclaiming my own peace and refusing to let the bitterness consume the days and years still ahead of me. I realized that holding on to hurt and fury was like clutching a stone so tightly that it chipped away at my own spirit while offering no true justice or healing. There was a time when I thought forgiving would mean giving in, letting the person who wronged me off the hook. But I came to understand that it was quite the opposite. It was an act of strength, a deliberate choice to release the power the betrayal had over me. This journey toward forgiveness was neither quick nor easy. It was a winding path filled with moments of doubt, pain, and the raw edge of memory resurfacing when I least expected it. I found myself wrestling with conflicting emotions, anger flaring up like a wildfire one day, followed by the soft rain of compassion the next. Forgiveness required patience, not only with others but with myself, as I navigated the tangled web of feelings that arose from being deeply hurt by someone I had trusted. It was a process of peeling back layers of pain, acknowledging each wound without judgment, and choosing to let go of the weight they imposed. I learned that forgiveness did not mean reconciliation or forgetting the lessons the betrayal taught me. It was a boundary, a way to protect my own heart while freeing it to heal and grow. This newfound understanding reshaped my perspective on what it means to be whole after suffering. I pictured forgiveness as a key, one I held firmly in my hand, that unlocked the door to my own freedom rather than releasing the person who had caused me harm. It was a gift I gave myself, a way to step out of the shadow of the past and into the light of possibility. As I embraced forgiveness, I noticed a subtle but powerful shift within me. The tightness in my chest loosened, and the weight on my shoulders began to lift. I felt a growing sense of peace that was not naive or forced, but earned through courage and grace. It allowed me to envision a future unchained from bitterness, a future where I could love and trust again without fear. Forgiveness became the soil in which my resilience took root, nourishing my spirit and giving me strength to face whatever lay ahead. It transformed pain into wisdom and sorrow into hope, proving that even in the aftermath of betrayal, the heart has the capacity to heal, to forgive, and to find light once more. This chapter of my life was not about excusing the past, but about freeing myself from its grip so that I could walk forward, lighter and stronger, toward a future filled with possibility and grace. There was a time when solitude felt like a vast, empty cavern echoing with loneliness and doubt. But over the course of my journey, I learned to embrace it as a sanctuary of strength, reflection, and profound growth. A quiet space where I could finally find peace with my past and the woman I had become. In the stillness of being alone, without distractions or demands, I discovered a freedom I had never known, a chance to listen to my own thoughts and emotions without the noise of others' expectations or judgments clouding the view. Solitude became a mirror, reflecting not just my scars, but also my resilience, a sacred pause that allowed me to untangle the threads of pain, betrayal, and loss woven tightly into the fabric of my life. I found that being alone did not mean being lonely. Rather, It meant forging a deeper relationship with myself, learning to sit with discomfort, and nurturing the seeds of self-compassion that had been buried beneath years of hardship. Like a garden left to rest between seasons, my heart began to bloom again, nourished by the quiet and the space to heal. The solitude gave me time to reflect on what had happened, to grieve what was lost, and to celebrate the strength it took to survive. It was in those moments of stillness that I realized how much I had grown, how the pain that once threatened to break me had become a foundation upon which I could build a new, stronger self. I learned to savor the simple pleasures often overlooked in the rush of daily life. A cup of tea by the window, the soft rustling of leaves in the breeze, the steady rhythm of my own breath grounding me in the present. These small acts became rituals of renewal, gentle reminders that healing is not a destination, but a journey, marked by both progress and setbacks. Solitude also taught me the value of boundaries, the importance of protecting my peace and choosing when and with whom to share my time and energy. I found courage in saying no, in turning away from relationships that no longer served my well-being, and in embracing the quiet strength that comes from standing alone, yet unafraid. The loneliness that once haunted me was replaced by a profound sense of wholeness and self-acceptance. I became my own companion, finding comfort in my own company and joy in the freedom to define my life on my own terms. This solitude was not a retreat from the world, but a preparation for it, a chance to gather strength, clarity, and courage before stepping forward into a future shaped by my choices, rather than the shadows of my past. In the quiet, I learned that peace does not come from avoiding pain, but from facing it with grace and allowing myself the space to heal. I embraced solitude not as isolation, but as a sacred gift, a refuge where I could nurture my spirit and rediscover the power within. Alone but never lonely, I stood on the threshold of a new chapter, at last at peace with my past, and ready to embrace whatever lay ahead with an open heart and steady soul. Holding my wedding ring once again, its cool weight resting comfortably against my skin, I felt a shift within me, a transformation of what this simple circle of gold represented in my life. No longer was it merely a symbol of loss, betrayal, or shattered dreams. Instead, it had become a testament to resilience, a tangible reminder of the strength I had found in reclaiming what was mine and standing tall despite the fractures life had dealt me. The journey to get the ring back had been long and arduous, filled with moments of doubt, anger, and heartache, but also with surprising bursts of courage and unexpected kindness. Every time I glanced down at that ring, I saw not just a piece of jewelry, but a chapter of my story. A story of endurance, reclamation, and the refusal to be defined by pain. At the same time, letting go of the house that had held so many memories was equally monumental. Selling it was not a loss, but an act of liberation, a deliberate choice to release the anchors that had tied me to a past filled with both love and betrayal. That house had been a witness to my joys and sorrows, a silent participant in my life's most intimate moments, but it had also become a prison of memories I could no longer bear to live amongst. Placing it on the market was like opening a door to freedom, stepping away from the shadows that lurked in every room and embracing the light of a new beginning. The sale marked more than a financial transaction. It was a symbolic shedding of old burdens and a courageous leap into an uncertain but promising future. Together, the reclaimed ring and the sold house represented a powerful duality, holding on and letting go, remembering and releasing, grieving and healing. They were the tangible milestones of a journey that had demanded every ounce of my strength and tested the limits of my spirit. Now, Standing at the crossroads of my past and future, I felt a profound sense of peace, a quiet knowing that I had done everything I could to honor the woman I once was, while making space for the woman I was becoming. This new life was not defined by the wounds I carried, but by the hope I nurtured and the choices I made to reclaim my story. I pictured the days ahead filled with possibilities, a home filled with laughter rather than echoes of pain, relationships rebuilt on honesty and respect, and a heart open to love and joy once again. The ring on my finger was a daily reminder of this promise to myself, to live fully, authentically, and without fear. The house that was no longer mine was a chapter closed, but its lessons remained etched in my soul, guiding me as I stepped forward into a future crafted by resilience and hope. I was no longer bound by loss or betrayal. I was defined by the courage to reclaim my life, the wisdom to forgive, and the strength to embrace new beginnings. This was my story now, a story of healing and renewal, of a woman who found power in vulnerability and freedom in letting go. As I looked toward the horizon, I felt ready to write the next pages with a heart unburdened and a spirit unshackled, carrying the ring not as a symbol of what was lost, but as a beacon lighting the way to a life reborn.